Most people think cutting expenses means cutting joy, that saving money is about sacrifice, deprivation, and saying no to the things you love. But what if I told you that you could reduce your spending without reducing your happiness? In fact, what if I told you that by spending less, you could actually enjoy more? Stick around, because I'm going to share how I cut down my expenses while keeping the joy in my life fully intact, and how you can do it too. The first step was realizing that joy doesn't always come from how much I spend. It comes from how I spend. For years, I equated a big price tag with bigger happiness. A fancier dinner must mean a better night out, right? A more expensive vacation must mean a better memory, right? But the truth I discovered is that joy is not measured in dollars, it's measured in meaning. When I shifted my mindset from how much can I buy to what actually makes me happy, everything changed. I started seeing that the real waste wasn't in cutting expenses, it was in spending money on things that didn't truly matter to me. The first way I cut expenses without cutting joy was by learning to embrace simple pleasures over costly indulgences, and this required me to rethink where happiness really comes from. For much of my life, I believed that joy had to be bought. New clothes, new gadgets, expensive dinners, lavish vacations. But over time, I realized that the thrill of those purchases faded quickly, often within days, sometimes within hours. What remained, however, were the bills, the financial strain, and the nagging sense that I had to work harder just to keep up with a lifestyle I didn't truly need. In my 50s, I began experimenting with cutting out these high-cost habits, and what shocked me was how little my joy diminished. If anything, it grew. For example, instead of expensive dinners every weekend, I started inviting friends over for home-cooked meals. Not only did I save hundreds each month, but I found that sharing laughter and conversation around my own table brought a sense of warmth that no restaurant could replicate. Instead of expensive spa days, I started practicing mindful routines at home, long baths, reading by candlelight, or simply going for walks in nature. I realized that the joy wasn't in the price tag, it was in the intentional time I gave myself to rest and recharge. Cutting expenses also forced me to get creative, and that creativity sparked joy in unexpected ways. For instance, instead of flying to expensive vacation destinations, I started exploring local places I had overlooked for years. Parks, hiking trails, small towns, and cultural festivals that cost little or nothing. I discovered that adventure isn't about distance, it's about curiosity. Some of my most joyful memories now come from low-cost trips where I felt fully present, instead of high-cost vacations where I worried about the credit card bill waiting for me at home. This habit taught me that when you strip away the financial pressure, you actually make more room for genuine enjoyment. By choosing simplicity, I found that my happiness was not only intact but amplified. The irony is that in cutting costs, I discovered abundance. Not the abundance of stuff, but the abundance of time, presence, and connection. And that's a lesson I wish I had learned sooner, that the best things in life really can be free, or at least a lot cheaper than we think. The second way I cut expenses without cutting joy was by aligning my spending with my values instead of my impulses, and this turned out to be one of the most liberating and empowering changes of my entire financial journey. For so many years, I wasted money almost unconsciously on things that did not reflect who I truly was or what I cared about. I was caught in a cycle that many of us know too well. Impulse buying that promised a quick burst of excitement, social comparison that made me feel I had to keep up with others, and clever marketing campaigns that whispered in my ear that happiness could be purchased if only I bought this one more product. A new phone every year, even though the old one still worked perfectly. Clothes that looked good in the store but sat untouched in my closet. Kitchen gadgets that seemed life-changing in commercials but ended up shoved in drawers, gathering dust. Each purchase gave me a little thrill, but the thrill was fleeting, and what lingered was a slow erosion of my bank account and a growing sense of dissatisfaction. In my 50s, I finally took a step back and asked myself a simple but powerful question. What do I actually value? That moment of honesty changed everything, because when I answered truthfully, I realized that my money was flowing toward things that had nothing to do with the life I actually wanted to live. I valued health, but I was spending more on greasy takeout and restaurant meals than on nourishing groceries that would fuel my body. I valued family, but I was wasting money on objects instead of creating experiences that would deepen our connections. I valued freedom, Yet I was locking myself into car payments, subscription services, and credit card bills that tied me down and limited my choices. This disconnect was eye-opening, and once I saw it clearly, I couldn't ignore it. I knew I had to realign my spending with my values if I wanted not only to cut expenses, but also to feel genuinely fulfilled. When I started making changes, something remarkable happened. It didn't feel like deprivation at all. It felt like alignment, as if my financial choices were finally in harmony with who I was. For example, I drastically cut down on buying clothes because I realized I already had more than enough. My closet didn't need more, it needed clarity. Instead of chasing trends, I embraced what I had, mixed and matched creatively, and when I did buy, I focused on quality pieces that reflected my style rather than the latest fad. The money I saved from not constantly updating my wardrobe was redirected toward family trips, even if they were small ones like weekend getaways or simple day trips. Those moments, watching my children laugh around a campfire, walking with my partner through a local town we had never visited, or just sitting together with no distractions, brought me infinitely more joy than another pair of shoes ever could. I also stopped buying the latest gadgets because I realized that new technology, while fun, didn't equal happiness. I had been seduced by shiny marketing promises that a new phone or tablet would somehow make life better, but in truth, life wasn't about the screen in my hand. It was about the moments I was living. Instead of chasing upgrades, I invested in my health. I began buying better groceries, focusing on fresh, whole foods that energized me instead of draining me. I joined a gym not because I wanted to follow a trend, but because I wanted to feel strong, mobile, and capable as I aged. I even took up meditation, investing in simple tools and classes that supported my mental well-being. These investments weren't about deprivation, they were about enrichment. Every dollar I wasn't wasting on meaningless purchases became a dollar I could direct towards something that added lasting joy. The surprising part of this entire process was that I never felt like I was losing anything important. Instead, I felt like I was gaining everything I had once overlooked. My spending became intentional rather than impulsive, and that gave me a sense of control I had never experienced before. Over time, this built a deep satisfaction because I could see the tangible results of my choices. My body felt healthier because I was nourishing it properly. My relationships grew stronger because I was investing time and money in experiences with the people I loved. My mind felt freer because I wasn't weighed down by debt or clutter. And perhaps most importantly, my finances became more stable because I had cut away the constant drain of unnecessary expenses. Aligning my spending with my values taught me that money is not meant to be a reflex, a reaction to emotions, or a way to keep up appearances. It's meant to be a reflection of who you are, what you care about, and the kind of life you want to build. Looking back, I realized that for years I equated joy with indulgence. I thought the more I spent, the more joy I was creating. But the truth is that joy isn't found in the quantity of purchases, it's found in the quality of alignment. When you spend on things that truly reflect your values, you don't need nearly as much to feel satisfied. And when you cut away the expenses that don't serve your values, you're not cutting joy, you're cutting noise. Today, I no longer see cutting expenses as a punishment. I see it as a form of freedom, because every dollar I don't waste is a dollar I can put toward living a life that feels authentic, joyful, and free of regrets. And that, to me, is the ultimate upgrade. The third way I cut expenses without cutting joy was by focusing on quality over quantity, and this was a lesson that reshaped not just my finances but my lifestyle. In my younger years, I was hooked on the idea of more clothes, more gadgets, more outings, more everything. The problem was that more didn't equal better. My closets were stuffed, my shelves were cluttered, and yet I never felt content. In my 50s, I shifted my focus from having more to having better. Instead of buying multiple cheap items that wore out quickly, I invested in fewer, higher quality things that lasted longer and brought more satisfaction. For example, I stopped buying fast fashion clothes that fell apart in months and invested in timeless pieces that I could wear for years. I stopped filling my kitchen with gadgets I rarely used and instead bought a few high-quality tools that made cooking a pleasure. This mindset even extended to my experiences. Instead of scattering money across countless shallow activities, I started choosing fewer but deeper experiences, like one meaningful trip instead of several rushed ones, or one thoughtful dinner with close friends instead of a string of superficial outings. And in doing so, I uncovered one of the greatest lessons about money and happiness: that quality creates joy in a way quantity never can. For much of my life, I believed that more was better. More outings, more things, more purchases, more activities. I thought that if I packed my calendar full and filled my home with possessions, I would somehow feel more fulfilled. But the truth was, I often ended up feeling overwhelmed, cluttered, and oddly unsatisfied. Many of the trips I rushed through blurred together, and I struggled to remember details because I had never slowed down enough to savor them. Many of the social events I said yes to were shallow, filled with small talk instead of connection, and while they cost me money, they didn't truly enrich my life. And the countless items I bought, cheap clothes, discount gadgets, decor that looked nice for a moment, ended up breaking, becoming outdated, or losing their appeal far faster than I expected. All that more didn't leave me with abundance. It left me with clutter, both physical and mental. It wasn't until I reached my 50s that I finally started to see the beauty of choosing quality over quantity, and the impact on my finances, my happiness, and my sense of peace was profound. What I discovered is that when you invest in quality, whether it's in possessions, experiences, or relationships, you actually end up spending less in the long run, because quality lasts. A high-quality pair of shoes may cost more upfront than 3 pairs of cheap ones, but they last longer, feel better, and bring more satisfaction each time you wear them. A carefully chosen trip, planned with intention and presence, may cost more than a few weekend getaways, but it stays in your heart forever, creating memories that you revisit again and again without ever needing to spend more. Even a single evening with a few close friends, filled with laughter and meaningful conversation, provides far more joy than a dozen nights spent in noisy places with people you barely know. In this way, quality multiplies joy while quantity dilutes it. And perhaps the most surprising realization was that cutting back on the more didn't feel like a loss, it felt like a relief. By saying no to endless consumption and yes to intentional, high-quality choices, I freed myself from the exhausting cycle of chasing the next thing. The joy that comes from quality also lasts far longer. Think about it. How many times have you bought something inexpensive just to treat yourself, only to forget about it days later? I had closets full of those kinds of purchases, and every time I looked at them, I felt a small pang of regret. But when I began investing in fewer, higher quality items, those feelings disappeared. I felt proud of what I owned because I knew it was chosen carefully and with purpose. The same applied to experiences. I no longer try to fit 5 activities into a single weekend just to feel busy or entertained. Instead, I chose 1 or 2 experiences that truly mattered, and I was present for them. A slow hike with family, a meal cooked together at home, a day spent exploring one place instead of rushing through 10. It was these moments of depth that left me feeling truly joyful. And the best part is that these quality experiences often cost less than the quantity-driven ones because they weren't about constant spending. They were about savoring what I already had. This shift taught me that cutting expenses doesn't mean cutting joy. It means cutting out the noise and making room for joy that's deeper, richer, and more sustainable. For example, when I stopped chasing the latest fashion trends, I not only saved money, but also reduced the mental clutter of constantly feeling like I needed something new to keep up. When I stopped buying gadgets that promised to make my life easier but ended up unused, I not only freed up my finances but also my physical space. When I stopped filling my calendar with shallow commitments, I gained back time, energy, and the ability to focus on the people and activities that truly mattered. Each of these shifts was like removing a layer of noise, leaving behind a clearer, simpler life where joy wasn't drowned out by distraction. By focusing on quality over quantity, I also reduced my stress. I no longer felt the constant craving for more, because I realized that more had never satisfied me in the first place. Instead, I began appreciating what I already had, and that sense of gratitude brought peace. My home became less cluttered, which made it easier to enjoy. My schedule became less overwhelming, which gave me space to breathe. And my finances became more stable because I wasn't wasting money on things that would quickly lose their value. All of this combined to create a life that felt lighter, freer, and far more joyful than the one I had been living when I was chasing endless consumption. Looking back, I see now that choosing quality over quantity wasn't just a financial strategy, it was a life strategy. It reminded me that joy isn't about having everything, it's about deeply appreciating the right things. It showed me that cutting expenses isn't about denying yourself, it's about directing your resources toward what truly enriches you. And it proved to me that a simpler life, one built on depth instead of excess, is not only less expensive but infinitely more fulfilling. Here's what I want you to take from this. Cutting expenses isn't about living smaller, it's about living smarter. I know how scary it can feel when someone suggests spending less, because our minds immediately jump to sacrifice and scarcity. But when I embraced these habits, I found the opposite of scarcity. I found abundance. I had more time, more energy, and more space to enjoy the things that truly mattered, because I wasn't drowning in financial stress or clutter. I wasn't saying no to joy. I was saying yes to joy that was real, lasting, and affordable. And here's the truth. You don't have to do everything at once. Start small. Cut one expense that doesn't really matter to you. Redirect that money towards something that does. Notice how it feels. Build from there. You'll quickly realize that joy doesn't come from spending more, it comes from spending better. And once you experience that freedom for yourself, you'll never look at money the same way again. So, as we wrap this up, remember this. Cutting expenses without cutting joy is not only possible, it's powerful. It's about identifying what really matters to you and letting go of everything else. It's about creating a life where your money serves you, not the other way around. And it's about realizing that happiness is not for sale, it's built through choices, values, and intentional living. Now ask yourself, where in your life are you spending money that doesn't add joy? What could you cut today that wouldn't hurt your happiness at all? And what would happen if you redirected that money towards something that truly fulfills you? The answers to those questions could transform not only your bank account but your entire life. Don't wait for the perfect time to start, because the perfect time is now. Start today and watch how cutting expenses can actually expand your joy. At the end of the day, cutting down expenses without cutting joy isn't about sacrifice, it's about intention. It's about choosing simple pleasures over costly indulgences, aligning your spending with your values, and focusing on quality instead of quantity. These 3 shifts allowed me to save money without feeling deprived, and in fact, they made my life richer and more fulfilling. The truth is, joy has never been about how much we spend, it's about how deeply we live. And when we stop wasting money on things that don't matter, we create space for the things that truly do. So take a moment to look at your own spending. Ask yourself if it reflects the life you want, or if it's just a reaction to habits and pressures that no longer serve you. Then make one small change and let it snowball. Because cutting expenses isn't about shrinking your life, it's about expanding your freedom. And with every choice you make, you're not just saving money, you're building a life that feels lighter, freer, and far more joyful.